Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Grid Live Wrap Up. I'm Kobe Lambert from Grid Tonight, and with me tonight got Tanner Smith from Pitbox Press and Matthew Bro from Grid Network TV.com. And before we get into the action tonight, oops, messed up the camera there. My bad. Yeah, do want to give our Patreon investors a shout out: Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for all you do for help out the Grid Network. And like I said earlier on the pre-race show, if it wasn't for you guys, Joe Samniego and Nicole Fry would not be able to go to the track this weekend at Portland International Raceway. So you guys, really help us get through this weekend, and we truly appreciate everything you do, not just for this weekend, the Grand Prix of Portland, but every single weekend throughout this year. And also, we also want to thank people who have donated us, with YouTube Super Chat and Buy Me a Coffee. And if you like what you see tonight, feel free to join the fun folks on the board off to our left as well. And also be sure to follow us all across social media and at Grid Network TV, and visit our website, gridnetworktv.com, because we're going to have a lot of content coming on Monday morning. Matthew to my right, he's going to have some NASCAR content from Watkins Glen, recapping that race. Nicole Fry is going to have an IndyCar recap, and we're also going to have a race day recap coming up on our YouTube of Joe and Nicole from the track. And also, we have a photo gallery as well that was going to be coming. So if you love NASCAR and IndyCar, got a lot of awesome things coming within the next 12-ish hours or so on the Grid Network. And there's a lot happening this weekend, guys, all across motorsports. NASCAR was at Watkins Glen, obviously IndyCar at Portland, and the Supercars were racing at Queensland Raceway, the final race of the Sprint Cup season. And we're going to start off with the Grand Prix of Portland, Matthew.
Absolutely, yeah. Like you said, that's a lot of exciting things you guys will be able to check out on gridnetworktv.com as well as all our social medias. But yes, Team Penske, guys, they will avoid the same disappointment from 1999 to make you guys feel old. I didn't exist yet, and that was a winless season for Team Penske. So pretty crazy, right? But earlier today, all of us said, he would be the highest finishing Team Penske driver, but we weren't sure if he could win, and he ultimately did. With no contract in 2026 and pressure to prove that he still has it, he still has that it factor. What it takes at 44 years old, Mr. Will Power held off Christian Lundgaard and Alex Palou in the final laps to win the BitNile.com Grand Prix of Portland for the third time in his NTT IndyCar Series career. In his post-race interview with Jack Harvey, Will Power said he's had a great career with Verizon and Team Penske, and talked about how much he enjoyed winning for the people he's worked for a long time. Ooh, I don't like the sound of that. However, Power's teammate Scott McLaughlin, he finished 7th. Joseph Newgarden, 24th after getting spun by Scott Dixon. On social media, former Team Penske driver Simon Pagenaud called Power an absolute legend who hasn't showed any signs of slowing down, and he said he really hopes the Australian driver will return to the Verizon car next year with Team Penske. And if anyone knows anything about driving for this organization with an uncertain future, it's Pagenaud, who was dropped by Penske after the 2021 season. So the first question for you, I'm going to throw it to you, Tanner. Did Will Power make a huge statement with a convincing victory at Portland, and would it be a mistake if Team Penske decided to drop him after this performance?
The first thing I want to say is that it doesn't really matter if it's a statement win to us at Grid Network or really anybody else outside of the Team Penske shop. It matters if it's a statement win to Mr. Roger Penske and the folks that run Team Penske. So with that said, me personally, I feel like this should be a statement win and should be at least cement. It should at least cement Will Power's place at Team Penske in the number 12 car, at least through next year. I feel that this season has been a profoundly disappointing one for the captain, but I feel like Will Power has often been the one to provide the most bright spots among their 3-car lineup. If you look at how they've run this year, Power was easily tops of the team in points. And I feel like he has been the one that's actually contended for victories outside of Newgarden, who has definitely done some contending at St. Petersburg, to Indy at some extent, at Indy to some extent, and also at Gateway in Iowa, but wasn't quite in the running at really many of the road courses or street races. And Scott McLaughlin has been fighting with Devlin DeFrancesco so much this season that feels like it's been more of a headline than anything else. So Will Power, being really the rock of Team Penske this year, has shown immense pace still, even with the new hybrid unit being attached to the back of the vehicle. And the fastest man in IndyCar history, the man with the most poles, came away with the W today at Portland after an extremely savvy, classic Will Power performance, putting everybody else in the rearview mirror and coasting away. And I feel like this should at least keep him in that car through next year, season after that. I feel like if Roger Penske wants to get David Malukas in a Team Penske car so bad, then maybe get a fourth charter and open up another team. I don't know. Like, you've got to do something else, because at this point, getting rid of Will Power is just not something that would be particularly intelligent. But at the same time, who am I to really question the captain? The man's made multiple business moves and run a race team into multiple race wins and championships. So, what I say isn't really worth a whole lot, but what I will say is that for me, Will Power reestablished himself as one of the best in the series today. And this is only a year after, coming ever so close to winning the title last year at Nashville before that unfortunate seatbelt malfunction took him out of Nashville and ultimately the championship. So I think next year coming back with Will Power would be the very smart thing to do. But right now, I think it's good for that 12 team to just celebrate this weekend.
And Tanner, just wanted to add one more thing about the charter thing. Actually, IndyCar's charter system is similar to the latest agreement that's come down in NASCAR, where you can have no more than 3 charters. So for that full-time team, if they enter the 4th team, it would have to be a so-called open car. So unfortunately, they won't be able to get a 4th charter in this situation. But in regards to that, I totally agree with you. I think that this number 12 team, given how difficult the year it's been for Team Penske on the IndyCar side, not been able to break through and find victory lane until now, I think that today was a huge sigh of relief for them, and this is something that they should absolutely celebrate. And Will Power certainly shows that despite almost been 45 years old coming up now, he's 44 now, that he's not slowing down anytime soon, as Simon Pagenaud perfectly said. And if you have a guy like Will Power who's still performing at this level, I don't see any reason why you should take him out of the seat, because he's still one of the best out there. And I believe it would be a mistake if Team Penske dropped him. And David Malukas is still really young, as you saw towards the end of that race. David Malukas, he looking at where he finished and all of that today in this race, he ended up finishing 19th, one lap down. And I think a driver as young as David Malukas, he could certainly use I guess some more seasoning, another year of experience, maybe as a Penske Junior driver at AJ Foyt race. I don't think that would hurt him to get another season at Foyt before you decide to eventually move on from Will Power, because they will move on at some point, whether it's this year or next year or the year after that. But I certainly think, given the way he's performing, there's no reason why you should take Will Power out of the seat, unless that's a decision that's already been made, kind of like similar to what Daniel Suarez said with his deal in Trackhouse. He announced, like after this was announced, he said that he basically knew, before the season started, that he was not coming back next year. So in Will Power, he can't really talk about this situation much other than what he's already said. So maybe a decision's already been made, because I was really questioning what he said, to Jack Harvey as well, as you read, Matthew, about Power saying that he's had a great career with Verizon Team Penske, and then mentioning how he enjoyed winning for people that he worked with, for a long time. So that part makes me wonder if a decision's already been made, and that while they say, winning solves everything, maybe winning won't be enough for Will Power to keep his seat. But for his sake, I really hope he continues to drive for the captain, because I believe that driver of Will Power's caliber, he deserves, to go out when he feels like he wants to go out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Kobe. And one other thing that I wanted to add is I did felt it was a pretty funny subtextual moment when towards the end of the race, Power just whizzed right by Malukas. It almost felt very poetic in a way.
Yeah, for me, I think we all said it as well as we all thought it wasn't the best idea for Penske to get rid of Will Power, who I feel like if you want to build your organization for one of the worst seasons it's had in quite a while, as we mentioned, I think he's the guy you have to put in the seat to be able to do it. He knows more than most. He has more experience than most, more wins than most in the series. So yeah, I think money talks ultimately as well. I know Penske's got more money than anyone that you've ever probably talked about in existence. But in terms of that, if Verizon wants to foot the bill to keep him in the car, then I think ultimately that's going to decide it. But yeah, Malukas probably needs a little more seasoning, like Kobe said as well. But yeah, I think this is a huge statement win, just because we weren't specifically, but I know the other people out there were talking, saying maybe he doesn't have it anymore, but he clearly showed he does still have it. He's got that it factor. I think is at 43 career wins now or 42. Either way, still incredible career, and hopefully, I think we all, even from a fan perspective, can say we love to see Will Power out there. Eventually, I'd love to see him get in a stock car again, see what he can do in NASCAR for Penske. Maybe that's best case scenario for us, right? But yeah, so good. There was the high for Will Power winning, high for another driver. There was a low though here today, and that was the championship battle as officially ended. Pato O'Ward lost power after starting on the pole. Arrow McLaren said a wire connected to the DI box malfunctioned, which cost O'Ward 10 laps and ultimately a mathematical chance of winning the championship. I know we all said it probably wasn't going to do it, but still, that really took him out. You hate to see that happen. So third place was good enough for Alex Palou to become a 4-time IndyCar champion at Portland. His third consecutive title and fourth in the last 5 years. Time to put him in the conversation, right? But with the title locked up early, we saw Palou take a huge risk by trying to overtake Christian Lundgaard for second place towards the end of the race. They touched wheels and Palou actually went off the track. So I'm going to throw this one to you first, Kobe. How disappointing was it for Pato O'Ward to see his long shot title hopes end this way? And was the move on Lundgaard from a more aggressive Palou? Was it a more aggressive move that we'll see in the final two races with nothing to lose on with Lundgaard?
I said, well, realistically speaking, I don't see how Pato O'Ward could be disappointed despite his racing in the way that it did, because it was inevitable, right? That Alex Palou was going to eventually become this year's IndyCar champion for the fourth time. And like you said, it was, long shot title hope. So the chances of Pato O'Ward being able to do anything with Alex Palou this year was extremely slim. I'm sure Pato, would have loved to keep this going. And if it hadn't been for, this issue that happened, maybe he could have, won the race, because it looked like he was certainly on the right strategy to win this race, or at least finish on the podium and ahead of Palou. But unfortunately, these things happen in racing, and that's just the way it had to be. But Pato O'Ward saw him talk to the media after the race, and basically he said he's just focused on finishing second in the championship and competing for wins in his last two races. So I guess as long as he finished second now to Palou and what's been a historic championship winning season for him, I think that will be a nice silver lining for Pato O'Ward to hang his hat on heading into the off season. And yeah, the Palou got really aggressive there, throughout the season. And he's been very surgical in his approach and only taking calculated risks and trying not to lose ground and valuable points. But I felt like that move on Lundgaard, he was like, hey, I've already clinched the championship. I got nothing to lose, so I'm just going to go on that side and see if it sticks. But unfortunately, it just didn't. And I think we're going to see a lot more aggression, not just from Palou in these final two races, for everyone, because with the championship gone now from all the others, they can just go out there and focus on trying to win the race, and also for any drivers who could potentially be on the hot seat looking for a ride next year, although it seems like most are already locked in, but you never know these days. They'll certainly want to go out there and try to impress in these last two races at Milwaukee and Nashville.
Yeah, I lean towards Kobe that it was probably inevitable that Pato O'Ward was not going to come away with the title this year, and probably wasn't going to walk away from this race with a chance at the title. But ultimately, you still got to be a little bit disappointed, even if, you're going for second in the standings at this point, for the simple fact that you definitely had a race win in hand if you're the 5 team. They put on a very powerful clinic in qualifying, obviously look to have gotten themselves on the right strategy today, and everything came up snake eyes for them relatively early on in the race. So if you're Arrow McLaren, you've got to be a little bit disappointed that a race win definitely slipped through your grasp. But at the end of the day, I think that this is a very solid season for them as a whole. Obviously, Lundgaard's been very close multiple times this season to victory, just hasn't been able to seal the deal. And I'm going to be honest, I don't foresee him winning either of the 2 ovals left on the schedule, despite McLaren's, obvious strength and prowess at those venues. But I will say that this was, in my opinion, a really great formative season for someone like Pato O'Ward, who has contended for titles in the past, and I wouldn't quite say he contended for this title by any stretch. I think this title is pretty much settled as soon as Palou crossed the finish line at Indianapolis. But I think that he showed a lot of maturity in the second half of this season and how he was able to make passes, get himself up to the front, and consistently win and run up front. So I think that he can take some of those principles into next season and really thrive and possibly challenge Palou throughout the season. As for Lundgaard's move on Palou, I mean, it was definitely a robust defense from the 7, but I also felt that Palou was trying to be a bit more advantageous than, was really necessary in that situation. I don't really feel like with the massive delta in push to pass that Palou still had left compared to Lundgaard that he really needed to push the issue there. But I also think that Palou wanted to try to go get the race win today and push his win total up to 9. And, obviously with 4 laps to go, you've got to go. So, in some ways, the over-aggression on Palou's part definitely got to him, but at the same time, you also have to look at it like he didn't really have anything to lose, and he was trying to go get the win, and you got to go through Lundgaard to get to power. So I don't see anything wrong with what happened in that particular situation on either driver's side. It was just a racing deal. I think that Lundgaard left Palou the entire width of a car and maybe an extra inch after that, and unfortunately, that just wasn't enough room for Palou, and he ended up taking his IndyCar off the road. But at the end of the day, everybody came through clean. Nobody ended up wrecking or losing a tire over it. So obviously hats off to Alex Palou and that entire 10 team. It was a fantastic charge from them today. And though it didn't end up in victory, you have another trophy to take home instead, so you can't be too upset.
Yeah, we might have to ask Joe and Nicole how the grass looks mowed in that one section of Portland International Racing. They're going off the track. But yeah, for Pato O'Ward, it was one of those things. Ultimately, it was pullover from the start. And honestly, I feel like the last couple of years, the title has ended the moment that Alex Palou is on the entry list for the first race of the season, just because of how good he's really been. I know there's been more fights than there were this past season, but you know what I mean? But yeah, it sucks that you hate to see it end that way ultimately. And I want to read this comment from Nicholas. Congratulations, Alex, for winning the championship. And I hope IndyCar doesn't have a playoff system next year. I think every single person in IndyCar fandom agrees with you, Alex. I think I can speak for the 3 of us. I think we agree as well for that one.
And the drivers, because the drivers were asked, about this throughout the weekend, multiple drivers. And like before you could even finish the question, it was like, no. Most of the drivers were. I think they're in agreement with everyone that we don't need to have a playoff system in IndyCar. That is just perfectly fine the way it is. That you don't need to go down to the final race, to crown a champion. Because if you have a historic season like this, Alex Palou's having, just appreciate the greatness and move on. Because sometimes you just have one guy who just goes out there and dominate everything, and I don't think that's anything people should get really upset about. Just appreciate greatness. I feel like people have a problem appreciating greatness, while it's here, and then some years pass by and then you're like, wow, why didn't I appreciate that guy more and respect what he did in those various circumstances, because Alex Palou's having such a great season. And also we talked about guys like Will Power, in his mid 40s, Scott Dixon in his mid 40s, and they continue to perform at a high level. And if you had like a playoff system like this, like if you're someone in your mid 40s, would it really be worth driving this late into your life? In just a place where, like, imagine you have a playoff system. Alex Palou has this historic season, and then you have like a championship, whatever, at Nashville. Then he crashes on the oval, or doesn't perform well, and then his season's over, and then this historic season would mean absolutely nothing. So I have a feeling if you added a playoff system to IndyCar, you see the likes of Will Power, Scott Dixon, racing to their mid 40s. You'll probably see drivers retire a lot earlier, because it probably wouldn't be worth it.
Yeah, I liked what Kyle Kirkwood had to say about it this weekend. I don't even think he let the reporter answer the question. He just said, "Hell no," and completely agree. Let's not do that. It's bad enough that we have it in 2 motorsports now that we cover. We do not need to make 3 a company here. We absolutely do not. In fact, I would like to see it go wholesale on any motorsport. It's a terrible format. Nobody likes it. And if they say they do, they're probably lying.
Yeah, I'm mad at Supercars right now for the fact that they started that, because that's the stupidest stuff. I almost said the S word. The stupidest stuff I've seen. But yeah, and it reminds you too, like Kobe said, not to base off the question, but Denny Hamlin even mentioned a comment in the NASCAR realm where they might, if they change the system, maybe he might go a little longer. But he also mentioned that NBC almost has, because they host the last however many races, that they almost have a say in it. Now you have Fox, who owns a third of IndyCar. Now, Fox, please don't mess this up. And it seems like Fox loves to touch stuff and mess it up with certain things. And I think that would be one of them. I really do. So I hope, from my biased opinion on that, I just really hope IndyCar decides to be the one American motorsport that you can look at and be like, wow, this is actually a full season, instead of hoping on some Cinderella playoff run, which their seasons are also kind of too short to really have playoffs. I don't think as 18-ish race season, however many long, like almost half of NASCAR season, I don't think that warrants a playoff at all. But
have we even had a Cinderella playoff run in the Cup Series? I can't think of one. Like, I'm talking about a true, they got the glass slipper and married Prince Charming. Like, it hasn't happened. You can point to Joey Logano last year. That's BS. He's a 2-time champion. There's nothing Cinderella about a guy that already has 2 crowns. I'm sorry. So, like, even in the lower series, that's where it's painfully difficult to even get that far. So, like, they've generated this whole thing and not accomplished anything with it. The same teams that have always had power with the previous formats still win, but it's just like the 3rd through 7th place guy that usually comes out on top, rather than the driver that was the best all year. And IndyCar's schedule is already so short as it is. Why do we need to throw in a playoff system to jazz things up? There's already so much urgency because there are so little time on the schedule, so little dates, so little laps on the schedule to allow for you to gain points. So it doesn't even make sense. It's not even compatible with what IndyCar does. So I really hope that Roger Penske and everybody involved with IndyCar takes heed to everything the drivers and the fans have been saying, because we do not want it. Please don't bring it to IndyCar.
Yeah, Penske seems to benefit from the playoff system in Cup lately, so maybe that was a deciding factor. But no, nonetheless, though. So to sum up my answer for Pato O'Ward, it sucks to see Lundgaard make the move on Palou. I felt like personally he didn't leave him enough room, but I also felt like Palou was making a very aggressive move, not in the right place, and then ultimately 2 wrongs don't make it right there. But yeah, so speaking of certain things, once again, inconsistent officiating was one of the main talking points as tempers flared between 2 drivers, Connor Daly and Christian Rasmussen. Initially, Daly tried to make a move on the outside of Rasmussen in turn 7, and then both drivers made contact and went off track. Then Daly retaliated by hopping the curb in the Shelton chicane, making contact with Rasmussen, nearly shoving the Ed Carpenter Racing driver off track. After that, both drivers were side by side through turn 10, which ended with them making contact one final time and Daly flying pretty much hard into the tire barriers with the left side of the car, with I believe all four wheels end up leaving the ground after how hard he hit. Race control reviewed this incident and decided to take no action at all. However, when Joseph Newgarden exited the pits and got spun out by Scott Dixon in the Shelton chicane, same place, race control decided, hey, we're going to give Dixon a drive-through penalty for avoidable contact. While nothing came from this incident involving Daly and Rasmussen, while nothing, sorry, I read that a little wrong. But speaking of Daly, he did go on social media, as he usually does, to express his frustration by saying, quote, purposely wrecking someone in a 150-mile-per-hour corner is just pure insanity. That's not racing. It's inexcusable. The driving standards for some are a joke right now. That means you, Christian Rasmussen. Interesting. Very interesting. So I'm going to throw this first one. I'm going to throw it to you, Tanner. Were you surprised that race control didn't penalize Rasmussen? And could this no call set a dangerous precedent in IndyCar moving forward?
I'm going to answer the second question first and say yes. The no call, no matter your take on what actually happened, what the intent was, or what have you, it will undoubtedly have a bad omen for the future of IndyCar if moves like what Christian Rasmussen made today, whether intentional or not, are going unchallenged by officiating. Like, things like that cannot happen on an IndyCar track. And Rasmussen's comments after the race talking about, I wasn't going to lift, I really don't like to hear that, especially in the NTT IndyCar Series, which, as we know, is relatively dangerous because of the high speeds and how light the cars are. They can definitely take air rather easily, and nobody wants to see that. I just feel that Rasmussen has had an extremely aggressive first full-time season in IndyCar this season, and he's really not making a whole lot of friends out there. And it's not in the same way that Carson Hocevar has been conducting himself in the NASCAR Cup Series, where, he's like, kind of joking about it, and Carson Hocevar isn't really like putting people in danger necessarily like how Christian Rasmussen is. But I just feel like at times young drivers really need to be sat down and have the law laid down on them. And I feel like this is an instance, in my opinion, where if you're not going to give a driver a penalty during the race, maybe he needs to sit out next week at Milwaukee. I think that for a move like that, and this is after, Rasmussen completely cleaned Daly out and knocked him off the course coming out of turn 7 just a few laps before. Like, didn't even attempt to race Daly out of the corner, and then to go in and just completely clean him out in the chicane later. Like, it was completely tasteless. It took no talent, and frankly, it is completely disrespectful and shows no care or consideration for the drivers you share the racetrack with. So, with all that said, I think that it would probably be in Christian Rasmussen and the NTT IndyCar Series' best interest to have the young driver sit out a weekend so he can think about what he did. I want them to put him in timeout.
And definitely don't disagree with anything you said, Tanner. I'm really frustrated by the inconsistency, in IndyCar race control with this officiating, because, we saw what happened. Joseph Newgarden was exiting the pits and Scott Dixon tagged him around in the Shelton chicane. And then as soon as that happened, Fox booth, they were saying that, yep, that should be a penalty. And I was thinking the same thing. I actually think IndyCar got the call right, to penalize Scott Dixon, giving him that drive-through for punting Newgarden, because that was avoidable contact. You didn't have to hit him, and back in the attenuator there. And I thought they made the right call there. But then, I'm wondering, how on earth can you penalize this at a low rate of speed and then an extremely dangerous, wreck? I mean, Connor Daly could have been hurt in that crash. It was such a, scary and fast part of the track. I don't understand how you call this on, Dixon for doing Newgarden, this way in a at a slower rate of speed and then a high rate of speed, you're like, oh, nothing to see here. So we're just gonna move on. And Rasmussen didn't even get parked, 5 laps for a rough driving like Austin Hill did at Indianapolis in the Xfinity race. I felt like at the bare minimum that Christian Rasmussen deserved to be parked for at least 5 laps or so. They try to send some type of message there, and for him to continue on with this race with no penalty at all, I thought that was extremely disappointing. I don't know the type of data that IndyCar has on these cars, like they do in NASCAR, where they can tell if you crash someone intentionally, but if Christian Rasmussen did, just flat out dump Connor Daly in this situation, and IndyCar has the data to prove that, I'm totally on board with what Tanner said. If there's data showing that he intentionally wrecked Connor Daly in this situation, I believe he should at least, get a 1 race suspension and sit out of Milwaukee, because, like Connor said, wrecking someone in a 150-mile-per-hour corner, that's, it's inexcusable, is ridiculous, and I think in those situations, you need to do a better job of taking care of your fellow competitors. And also, I want to say Connor Daly isn't completely innocent in this situation as well, because when Rasmussen knocked him off the course, what did Connor Daly do? You could tell he was fired up. It looked like he was chasing Rasmussen down, trying to get him back, and he actually got him back. He went as far as to drive as deep as he could into turn 1. Then he hopped over the curve in the Sheldon chicane just to swipe Rasmussen. And then they just continued to chase each other on the track, and, it just ended very poorly for Daly there. So I think that it was not a good move to, make a no call on this and decide that we're not going to do anything, because I believe they also could set a dangerous precedent moving forward, because if guys see you can get away with this type of stuff, we'll see it again once they get hot inside underneath the helmet. And I don't know, obviously we don't know what happened after the race, but I really hope that IndyCar called Christian Rasmussen to their hauler, to have a conversation with him, because playing stock cars in an open wheel car, one day this is going to end badly, and I don't want to see someone injured. I'm glad Connor Daly's okay and escaped this, but when tempers flare like the way that they did in these Indy cars, which are not stock cars, I think it's something that doesn't need to happen. It was really disappointing to see this play out on the racetrack.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you guys remember, Connor Daly almost didn't race in IndyCar this season. He actually had a deal. He was trying to race full-time Xfinity with Sam Hunt Racing, so in the Xfinity Series, obviously. So what I'm getting at is he put out a statement saying something that would have cost him like $4.3 million in sponsorship to race full-time Xfinity. So maybe he should reach out to Rasmussen and say, hey, if you want to race stock cars, not in IndyCar, but actually race stock cars, I have Sam Hunt's number. I know the cost. Go find your sponsorship and go over there. So he could say that to him. He won't. But yeah, it's just one of those things where not the right time to be inconsistent with your IndyCar. And yeah, it's at this point in the season, is a points penalty really worth it if you don't, like, say you suspend him, say they find it was intentional? So it's one of those things. It's like it's so late in the season that points, I don't know if they really matter, since well, not like they were going to win the championship anyway, but I don't know what the dollar amount is difference from finishing, say, 15th in the standings to 14th or so on and so forth. But yeah, not calling that does set a dangerous precedent in that sense, but I don't know how many IndyCar drivers truly drive like they're racing stock cars in IndyCar. So I guess that's the only thing on IndyCar's side right now, is not many of those drivers drive that aggressively and that angry and make emotional decisions with racing 1,000-pound open wheel vehicles. So ultimately, we'll see what happens. And yeah, also just to keep in mind, gridnetworktv.com, Grid Network, at Grid Network TV on pretty much every social media you could think of. There is content from IndyCar either there already or coming, so please make sure to check it out. Joe and Nicole, thank you to everyone as well for allowing them to be there this weekend. I know they're having fun. I know Joe, it's always a blast to see him there. He'll be there, I think, in a couple weeks as well, Xfinity Series. But yeah, speaking of that, I don't know if you guys want to add anything else to the IndyCar season, IndyCar portion of this show.
The one thing I wanted to tag on about what Kobe said was that, like, I feel that Daly, yeah, maybe you could argue he didn't really do himself any favors, but also at the same time, I feel like the NTT IndyCar Series this year, as you displayed in the Palou Lundgaard question, has been very questionable in terms of their officiating consistency, so to speak. I feel like the drivers have been allowed to get their elbows out a lot this year. I mean, Daly was on the rough end of it at Mid-Ohio when Ferrucci knocked him off the track and also didn't get a penalty for it. And that was a race where Daly didn't get a chance to take a swipe back at Ferrucci in any way. So I feel like some of the younger drivers have been getting more leeway than some of the more seasoned veterans in the series have, really been able to play with in the past. So it's like the young guys are playing by a completely different set of code of conduct compared to what guys like Will Power, Joseph Newgarden, and Connor Daly and them grew up with. But that was really all I wanted to add. Kobe, do you want to say anything else on that?
Yeah, and just to piggyback off what you were saying, about the risk these younger drivers, this new generation of talent is willing to take. We had this conversation, I believe, last year here on Grid Network about how the cars are as safe as they've ever been in the history of IndyCar, and with the drivers, feeling mostly safe in those cars, they're willing to make these crazy moves and take these risks because I guess it's what I call a false sense of security, that they believe that they make a move like this that they'll be fine if something happens, or the other driver will be fine. And like I said, we just had this conversation last year about this subject, whether how safe the cars are nowadays allow these younger drivers to think, hey, I'm invincible, I'm 10 foot tall and bulletproof, that I can go out there, I can make this move, there won't be any horrible repercussions from it.
Indeed. Well, enough of the IndyCar weekend at Portland. We're moving over to Watkins Glen, where the NASCAR Cup Series took the track in the Finger Lakes region of New York, where a road course lies that, much like Mexico City, Chicago, and Sonoma before it, was inevitably conquered by none other than Shane Van Gisbergen. The Blazing Kiwi started the day second and led the most laps today en route to his fourth win of the 2025 season at Watkins Glen, tied now for the series lead in wins with Denny Hamlin, with just 2 races left to go in the regular season. SVG also broke the record for most wins in a single season by a rookie driver in the Cup Series, exceeding the 3 wins matched by Tony Stewart in 1999 and Jimmy Johnson in 2002. It was a great day for Trackhouse as a whole, with Daniel Suarez picking up a nice 7th place finish and Ross Chastain rounding out the top 10 and 10th. It was the first time the team has had all 3 cars in the top 10 since adding a third chartered team. During the pre-race show earlier today, Kobe mentioned how Michael McDowell told the media yesterday that drivers show up to road courses feeling like they've already been defeated by SVG. He said he didn't understand how other drivers could have that mentality, even if beating the number 88 team on road courses is an admittedly tall order. At this point, drivers are just thrilled to finish second behind SVG, just like Christopher Bell did today, who said it was frustrating to get their butts kicked by the road course ace for the second time this season, as Bell finished second at Mexico City as well. So, Matthew, how deflating must it be for SVG's Cup Series competitors that he's not just dominating the road courses, but at 2 tracks they've been going to for years, Sonoma and now Watkins Glen?
Yeah, I feel like, Tanner, it was more deflating in 2023 at Chicago when he just came out of nowhere. Literally still was in a season where he was racing on the other side of the car, where his cockpit was on the other side. So that says a lot about how far this series has come to, with Shane Van Gisbergen specifically in this series. Having what? In Cup, he's got, I think, total, how many wins does he have now? Gosh, like 9-ish career wins, Xfinity and Cup or something? Yes. Thank you. So it's like, damn, already, right? Or, yeah. So, other side of the world, other side of the car, like you just said in the chat as well. But, yeah, it's got to be less deflating now, considering he's got more reps in at the same time. But like you said, now I mentioned in the show, and I mentioned in my story too, Watkins Glen was the last track, it seemed like, that had Shane Van Gisbergen's number, because he finished second there previously in Cup and fifth. I said fish. But now he's finally got the win. And Sonoma obviously belt the butt again. Watkins Glen won by 11 seconds. So it's like, they should be mad. Do better, the Cup guys. You guys have been in these cars a lot longer than this 35-year-old man from New Zealand area. So it's like, yeah, you just got to do better. And it's hard when Shane Van Gisbergen is literally one of the best road course racers, probably of all time, in stock cars. So he could be already the greatest NASCAR road ringer technically, but he doesn't want to really be considered as a road ringer. He just wants to be considered as a driver that can win multiple races a year. So, yeah, it's concerning. But then Christopher Bell, I think, probably feels the worst, considering how damn good Christopher Bell has been. He's either finishing second, pretty much every Shane Van Gisbergen win, Christopher Bell's either in second or in the top 5. Besides, I think Chicago this year, he had some issue where he ended up in the 20s. But literally, I think he has like 5 road course top 5s in the last 6 races or something like that. Absurd. And most of them have been runner-up to Shane Van Gisbergen. So, yeah, Christopher Bell's probably upset about it. And I know we talked, Kobe mentioned, Michael McDowell said a lot of guys come in, they're defeated because they know how good Shane is. And it seemed like Michael McDowell didn't come in defeated yet, had a very quiet 20th place area run. So I don't know how you should feel, right? It's like, it's just one of those things where, sure, you're probably mad or deflated that this guy who wasn't in driving on this side of the car until just a couple of years ago is literally belt to butt every single time you go to a track like this. And now the most rookie wins ever in a single season. Grant, who cares if they're all on the same style, of course. I know some people make the comment, he's still a rookie with just 38 races under his belt. He's already got 5 wins. So it's like, who else has done it? Nobody else has done that. So it's just one of those things, Tanner. It's really funny to think. If you told me in 2022 when I started at Grid Network and you showed me the future and you put up the standings and it has Shane Van Gisbergen in a cup car with 4 wins, I don't know what would have happened. My brain would have exploded. Be like, you're telling me Shane Van Gisbergen just went to the NASCAR Cup Series and started winning every road course? So yeah, that's my long answer to that.
We have a comment here from Scott saying SVG versus Borisset. No offense, no contest. Borisset never even won a cup race. So with all due respect to Boris, I loved watching him when I was younger, and I think he was a fantastic road racer that never really got the equipment necessary to contend. I just don't think he would even sniff that same atmosphere as SVG. But to get back to the question at hand, I definitely feel like for the Cup Series drivers that were regularly competitive at Sonoma and Watkins Glen, such as Chase Elliott, who was nowhere to be found today. Let's not forget that. I feel like for guys like that, it's really got to be soul-crushing to just watch him absolutely eviscerate them every time they hit a right turn. Like, I could not possibly imagine being, like, defeated going into the weekend. Like, that's got to be just so devastating. With that said, I feel like one driver that, really put their best foot forward this week was Ryan Blaney, but I feel like they had a slow final pit stop and ultimately worse tires than the 88 at the end of the race. So even if they had gotten out ahead, I just don't think at the end of the day that the 12 car would have had enough based on their strategy to hold the 88 back. But the 88 got clean track at the end and essentially set sail once he knew that William Byron and Chris Buescher were not going to make their way by him. But moving on to a follow-up question here, Matthew. Obviously now SVG has 4 wins, 22 playoff points, which is the 3rd most behind Hamlin and Larson at the moment. And he's making gains on ovals. So is it realistic to think that SVG could sneak through the first round of the playoffs, win the Charlotte Roval, then advance to the round of 8?
I don't see why not. I mean, Darlington is his favorite oval, at least I think so. And Gateway is going to be interesting. And as long as he doesn't put up a Bristol Motor Speedway performance like he did last time out, I think there's a realistic shot. So for him to get all these playoff points, it's truly great. And it's just so funny when people dismiss the idea of Shane Van Gisbergen only winning on road courses and he's not good at ovals or whatever. If you look at the points, he's only 4. He's still technically last in points among guys who have won races this year. However, he is only 4 points behind Josh Berry. So he's caught up to Josh Berry. So we'll see how those two battle it out at Richmond and Daytona. Richmond, I think Berry's got the favorite, but Daytona, anything can happen. But Yeah, I really think it's realistic, and I can't say he's going to fare very well in the round of 12 besides the Roval, but if his points, carry over and he's be able to do that, he's got to go points racing. So I think we'll see what happens there. But I think one thing we did mention is when the Roval was added to the playoffs. This was what I can recall from a few years ago. I think when they added pretty much the winning in and stuff like that, and Allmendinger came back up the Cup, I think a lot of us thought Allmendinger was going to be like Shane Van Gisbergen in the sense where he could make a deep playoff run, winning it in the regular season full time, and then winning at like the Roval, making it to the round of 8 at the time. But obviously that didn't happen. But yeah, so I think it's a realistic statement. I really do. I think he can do it. And part of me really hopes he does from a fan perspective, because nothing like shushing the haters by doing exactly what they say you can't do. So I think we'll see. I think we'll be having a fun conversation by September? Yeah, I think. Well, technically, September 13th is the last race of the round of 12. Or round of 16. So yes, we'll see there. Well, a month away, guys. We'll have this conversation again. How Shane's doing.
For me, I think a lot of it has to do with what his competition will look like, and we just don't really have any idea of who or what that's going to look like yet. Right now, it appears that Tyler Reddick and probably Alex Bowman will make it on points. Obviously, Richmond, as we've seen, can provide a brand new winner out of completely thin air, but I just have a sneaking suspicion that it's probably going to be like the bottom 4 from the round of 16 are probably going to be Van Gisbergen, Cindric, Barry, and there will probably be a surprise person that doesn't have a lot of playoff points. Like, I think William Byron might be relatively vulnerable going into the postseason, or someone like Chase Briscoe, perhaps, a guy that kind of, likes to take risks and ultimately they may or may not work out. But then again, he could just as easily go out and win the Southern 500 again and be just fine. So as far as SVG's playoff potential, it all depends on how well he finishes, really. Doesn't even really matter where you run in those races. It just matters where you and the other 15 drivers finish. So if he can just control what he can control in that first round, that'll probably be the best bet that he's going to have to make it through. But moving on to the next question here. A surprise to many, Ryan Blaney took the pole this weekend, led the second most laps, and won the second stage on the way to a solid 6th place result that he lost in the final corner to Chase Briscoe to lose out on the top 5. Meanwhile, his Team Penske teammates came in 14th, 16th, and 35th. That's Logano, Cindric, and Barry, respectively. Barry obviously had that Stage 2 crash with Zane Smith that put him way behind the 8 ball and damaged his car. But as we head into the playoffs, obviously all 4 of these drivers are locked in with wins, but their current playoff point tallies leave them vulnerable to an early exit. Matthew, of the Team Penske drivers, which one has the best opportunity to make a deep playoff run at this moment, and which driver is the most vulnerable to fall out of the round of 16?
Without a doubt, it's to make a deep run is obviously Ryan Blaney. I don't think there's even a single doubt in anyone's mind that Ryan Blaney is the best Penske driver, regardless of Joey Logano still winning multiple races, multiple championships. I think Ryan Blaney's just been really incredible, and he was very close last year to going back-to-back as well. So, and plus, I know we joke, but it's an odd year, so I don't know if Logano might be on the bottom. But it wouldn't shock me, to be honest with you, when you say which driver is the most vulnerable. I know we count Wood Brothers as Penske as well. It wouldn't shock me if Logano, Cindric, and Barry were all eliminated in the first round. I know that's a bold take, but I think it is quite possible. Cindric has been quietly good, but he really it's like if you toss any water at him, his hot streak just completely diminishes, and it takes him a while to get back at it. I don't think we give Cindric enough credit for – I really think he is a good driver. But Barry's been quite quiet. Obviously, besides the one win, we wouldn't even be talking about him this season. And then with Logano, I know he has a win. He has 7 playoff points. And Logano's actually doing better this year than he was last year, which I don't know if that should be a warning to anyone. But Logano would be 13th in the standings. Ryan Preece actually does have more points technically than Joey Logano. But yeah, Ryan Preece has also been quietly good. So of the Team Penske, I really think it's a 1 versus 3 question here. I think the guy with the best opportunity is Ryan Blaney, who I think can make a deep run easily to the round of 8. And then I really think the other 3 that you mentioned was Cindric, Logano, and Berry all could be eliminated. I really think that could. Obviously, there's guys you don't know, Bowman, Reddick, guys like Bubba as well. Chastain might have a bad couple races, and then all of a sudden they're out. But yeah, those 3 I really think could be the 3 all Fords get eliminated in that round. I don't know who would be the odd one out. Maybe if Buescher points in, I don't know. No, but Buescher I think would make the round of 8. So yeah, that's my long story.
Gotcha. Me personally, I agree with you that Blaney is probably the top guy over at Team Penske. Obviously, has the one dominating one at Nashville, but he's been up front in the conversation practically all year long. Obviously has a lot of bad results on his ledger this year, but I think a lot of those have to do with things that were outside of his control or happened, and he couldn't do anything about them. As far as the other 3, though, I kind of have to agree with you, Matthew, that I think that all 3 of them are really in danger of making the next round of the playoffs. Obviously, the round of 12 when it pops up, but, I also think that Team Penske showed a lot of flash last year at Gateway. All 3 cars were strong. Obviously, you got to take Harrison Burton completely out of that conversation, but I have no reason to believe that Josh Berry isn't going to show strength at Gateway. Obviously, we have Darlington in that round, which theoretically Berry should be good at. Same with Logano, who is a former winner at that track, and Blaney, who had the best car there at the end of the race and unfortunately got buried on an overtime pit stop. So I think that if you're the 12 team, you have to feel very confident, but literally everybody else you got to be a little bit concerned about. As far as Bristol is concerned, I think that's just so completely up in the air for everybody. I don't think that there is a consistent through line to determine who's actually going to contend, what the tire is going to do there, how literally anything is going to respond. So I feel that, as far as the Penske drivers or Penske adjacent drivers, I have the least confidence in Berry. He's the least experienced. He's never been in the Cup playoffs before, and generally speaking, the 21 is the 4th team, but I also wouldn't be surprised to see Cindric duck out of that round as well as the 13th or 14th driver. Moving on to our next question here. So we got Ty Gibbs. Came home 33rd today after being on the short list of drivers that could contend for the win. The third-year Joe Gibbs Racing driver looked to have a solid position in the running order heading into Stage 3, which was immediately after he dumped Toyota teammate John Hunter Nemechek in the carousel on the final lap of Stage 2. Gibbs shared some heated communications with race strategist Chris Gabehart during the third stage, and after a slow pit stop and another unscheduled pit stop at the end of the race, it ended their opportunity at contention with the 54 team. So, with the other 3 JGR cars surging this time of year and no path for Gibbs to make the postseason from here without winning, how should the 54 team view this 2025 season, Matthew?
It's tough, and I was one of the few that said Ty Gibbs would be a sleeper, so I ate crow on that one today. And one person you don't want to disagree with is Chris Gabehart, I feel, just because of his success. And, yeah, it's tough, Tanner. It really is, considering Briscoe's having a career year. I think he has now 10 top 5s, which is definitely his best in his career. Obviously, Denny Hamlin still looks like prime Denny Hamlin, and Christopher Bell is one of the best drivers in the Cup Series. They're Hamlin and Bell are 3rd and 4th in the regular season points now, and that's even with Hamlin missing a race. So the 54 team, it's like, how do you view it? He only has 109 races under his belt, but he has been full-time now. This is his third season, and then he raced half of the 2022 season in the next gen, substituting for Kurt Busch. It's like, I get he's 22 years old still. So it's like, how do you view it? A lot of guys don't really win until around their 100th race. I know Jackson Todd had that whole thing about that, which I love that chart of how it takes a little bit for some drivers to really get it done. And it's weird because Ty Gibbs went from kicking butt in Xfinity, winning the championship, and then just nothing in Cup. I know he has like 29 top 10s, which is pretty good for 100 races, I guess. But when you're in Gibbs equipment, I expect you to do better than I believe I'm looking now. He has made his way up to 17th in points. Not that that matters because he has less wins than Barry and Van Gisbergen, so that automatically puts him 2 spots back. So I think do you view it as a failure or do you view it as like, oh, like how many guys in like would you rather have in that 54 car? It's kind of like what you think about. I know obviously Gibbs is Gibbs, right? And I think Ty Gibbs can truly become a champion in this sport at the Cup level. But it's like you don't want to get impatient, right? But at the same time, it's like I would have expected him to have multiple wins already. I really would have, but he just doesn't. And he's still learning. I think he could. I'm not going to say he's going to have a Truex type career where it waits and then he peaks like when he's a lot older, because I think he was probably better. I'm not going to say better than Truex at a younger age, but he kind of was dominating more. But yeah, I don't know. You can't really replace Ty Gibbs anyway, unless you loan him on satellite, or he specifically tells you, I want to go Xfinity racing again. That's really the only way. I think he should be getting more reps personally in Xfinity. He still falls in that little realm, I believe, where he can practically race almost full time, if I'm not mistaken, if that rule still stands. Because I know Jeff Nemechek utilized that a couple of years ago where he ran a lot of Xfinity races for Gibbs. Another guy who I think if Nemechek went back to Xfinity, he could be a championship contender in the right equipment. Yeah, that's my long answer to that. You can't really view it as a failure, but at the same time, now you're 109, 110 races into his career, and he still has not won. He's sniffed a couple of them, but he just hasn't found victory lane. So it makes you wonder how many more years it's going to take, how many more races it's going to take. Because I think it's inevitable he gets in victory lane. I couldn't tell you when now.
So I think that I was under the impression when Ty Gibbs got an early start to his Cup Series career with the 23 or the 45 team, I should say, over at 2311 after Kurt Busch's injury at Pocono in 2022. I thought that would give him a leg up going into his full-time career with the 54 team in 2023 onward. And, obviously we saw flashes more so in 2024 of, a driver really coming into their own. But then you look at the stats at the last bit of that season in 2024, and he completely fell off the map. And we chronicled it a lot coming into this season because he continued to struggle with new crew chief Tyler Allen. And I feel like, personally, if you're JGR, obviously Ty Gibbs has as long of a leash as he will ever need because he is the owner's grandson. And honestly, probably the heir to the company at this point. But I also think your performances really need to be kept into context. And I feel that he has significantly underperformed this season compared to his teammates. I mean, Briscoe, though he doesn't have multiple wins, has contended for multiple wins, has been in the conversation for multiple wins, has won 6 poles this year. And then his other 2 teammates are battling for the league lead in wins. I feel like they did Ty Gibbs a disservice coming into the year with a brand new green to Cup Series rookie crew chief. It just is not fair to give a young driver who isn't established, has not won yet, a rookie crew chief in his 3rd year. And frankly, I don't care if that's who he asked for. I really don't. I think that at a certain point, some drivers need to take their medicine and need to be given a crew chief that will actually help them reach their potential. And I just do not think giving them a rookie crew chief is going to be a great path to get there. I think that's part of why SVG has been so poor on the ovals outside of Trackhouse and General's malfeasance at those racetracks. I feel like Steven Doran didn't show me anything last year as Zane Smith's crew chief, and I think that Zane Smith is easily a better oval driver than Shane Van Gisbergen at the moment. I feel like he wasn't able to extract really anything out of him for the most part last year, and you've seen that same lack of pace show up with the 88 car this season. So you transfer that over to Ty Gibbs, who again has been in the sport all of his life, has been at the track all of his life, and has been racing probably most of his life, on ovals predominantly, and just no pace most of the year. Obviously, Mexico City and Michigan stand out as races where he had a lot of pace and ultimately wasn't able to convert. But I also just think that if you give a rookie crew chief to a up-and-coming driver like Gibbs, you are practically punting on the season right from the beginning. This is a rebuilding year for that team, so you kind of have to weigh it that way in my eyes. With Gabe Hart coming in, I don't remember exactly when that started. I feel like it was around Pocono. But whenever that started, I was like, okay, this might be the nudge in the right direction that he needs. Like, not only are you getting the guy that you picked to be your crew chief, you're also getting the team's competition director that's made multiple Championship 4 appearances and has won 2 Daytona 500s, a Southern 500. Like, Chris Gabehart's resume precedes it. And I just feel like it's been no change whatsoever. And hearing those radio communications of those two bickering at each other really left a sour taste in my mouth, because I just feel like all these people are trying to help Ty Gibbs, and Ty Gibbs is not really doing a whole lot to help himself. I feel like he needs to take this off season and probably the rest of the playoffs to like maybe visit with a sports psychologist or something and work through some of these communication issues he clearly seems to have, because I just don't see his career going anywhere, much like Austin Dillon's, if he can't figure out what's wrong with his race car and figure out how to make it better. Because that's what a lot of what today sounded like. It sounded like early William Byron, where he just didn't know how to read his race car and didn't know how to make adjustments to it to make it better. Ty Gibbs needs to have a better relationship with the people that works on his car to help make his car and his team faster. Because right now, the way that he communicates with them and the way that the results are showing how they communicate, it's not good. So I think going forward, the 54 team, I don't think you can look at this season as an abject failure, especially with how they've charged through the summer to get back into the top 20 in points. But you also need to recognize that we've hit that 100 start threshold, and at this point it's starting to get a little bit scary as to when that first win ever is going to pop up. Moving on to some other young drivers, though, that had a bit of a run-in last weekend and now up to this weekend. Last week, Carson Hocevar and Zane Smith made contact going into turn 1 on a restart, sending Smith's car spinning into the outside wall and angering him greatly. Obviously, Smith tried to take a swipe back at Hocevar later in the race and missed, and Hocevar cruised to a top 10 finish while Smith languished in the back of the pack. Looks like Hocevar has angered another driver, and this time it's seasoned veteran owner driver and 2012 Cup Series champion Brad Keselowski. Unbeknownst to us, NBC did show footage from qualifying yesterday and explain how Hocevar thought Keselowski ruined his lap. So Hocevar, in retaliation, slowed down and ruined Keselowski's lap as well. Mutually assured destruction. Keselowski jumped out of his car and sprinted toward Hocevar and had to be restrained. Meanwhile, in the race today, Hocevar had a very eventful day, getting spun by his teammate Michael McDowell. Was able to drive back up to the 18th place, which was coincidentally one spot behind Zane Smith's number 38 Ford. After the race, a reporter shared a video of Hocevar having a brief conversation with Smith, who was still sitting inside his car at the time. This comes a day after Smith telling NASCAR.com that Hocevar was an idiot. Matthew, if Hocevar keeps making enemies on the track, how much harder will it be for him to make progress in his career despite having a ton of upside?
A lot. I mean, a lot. And I do want to mention quickly before I get into my answer, mad at Hocevar for moving out of the way to let Zane get into 17 because it cost me in our fantasy league. I had picked. It's funny enough; those two were either Smith or Hocevar, and I picked Hocevar just because of obviously his success here at Watkins Glen, and then obviously he moved out of the way. And then when he went to talk to him in the car, I believe that brief conversation was like Hocevar saying, "I moved out of your way. I know that doesn't make up for it." And I know I'm probably still owed something kind of deal. So that's the way I interpret it. I don't know about you guys, but yeah, Hocevar I think Hocevar's got all the talent. And I think everyone can recognize Hocevar's got a lot of talent. But you aren't winning. You're not earning respect on your way to trying to win. And I'm sorry, but I don't think he's that guy to embrace the villain role. He's not. I mean, I'm looking at funny. Brad Keselowski actually just passed him in the standings. That's a far climb for Keselowski where he was just a few months ago. He's actually ahead of Hocevar now. But yeah, when you're getting a 41, 42-year-old Brad Keselowski mad enough to get out of his car and charge at you, something's wrong, dude. You got to fix it. And I know he's just, I can't say if it's like young Joey Logano where there's two separate people, whether they're talking on camera, talking to your stream. Obviously, streaming really wasn't a big thing when Logano was a kid, but you know what I mean. They're two different personalities when you get on track versus when you're off track. And I don't think drivers like that. I think Kyle Busch has even said about Logano, he's like, you got to pick one. You can't be, I can't say the words Kyle used on camera, but you can't be, it's Mr. Nice Guy here and then that on the track. You can't be that guy. And Hocevar, I think, is trying too hard to be the villain. I think it's more or less him trying to be it, while someone like Chastain a few years ago just accidentally became it. I don't think Chastain really tried to become a villain, but I think Hocevar really is trying, and he shouldn't be. I think he's got all the talent. I think he can win multiple races in his career. He's definitely helped Spire Motorsports significantly. But, man, it's just like you can't go around picking a fight with a different driver every single race weekend. It's not going to work, dude. You're young. You got a lot of talent. I don't think anyone's going to try to punch him in the face. Maybe I'm not going to say he needs that, but granted, he's like 6'47", right? So I don't think anyone's really going to go after him. Maybe Noah Gragson. Obviously, Gragson was the only one that went after Chastain, and ultimately that didn't end well for Gragson. So maybe
he got popped in the mouth himself.
Yeah, he did. So maybe I'm not going to say that's what Hocevar needs. I wouldn't really wish ill will or any physical harm on anyone, but something needs to be said to Hocevar to really change that mentality that you mentioned with Ty Gibbs. It's like, I know they're still young. Granted, I'm older than both of them, which makes me sick to my stomach. I'm 24 now, but it's like something's got to click in their mind to realize that you can't go around doing what you're doing. I think Ty Gibbs has learned his lesson from his Xfinity days, sending his own teammate to win a race when his teammate could have easily had two Gibbs racing cars in the championship 4 that year. He sent Brandon Jones into Martin. So I think Hocevar, I don't know if Hocevar needs a moment like what Sam Mayer tried to do to Ty Gibbs a couple of years ago or what Gragson did to Chastain. I wouldn't condone that, but something needs to happen, Tanner. He's too damn good to be doing stupid stuff like this. And I think we mentioned with Austin Hill and Xfinity making silly mistakes. Not similar circumstances, but you know what I mean in the sense where you got all this talent, you shouldn't be making the mistakes like you are. And I think Hocevar is just continuing to dig himself into a really deep hole that he will fit in because he is really tall.
I have a bit of a different perspective. As someone that's been high on Hocevar since 2020, the kid's got all the talent in the world necessary to become potentially a champion in this sport, I feel like. Granted, I kind of agree with you. I think that he's got to stop making problems for himself, but The Keselowski incident in particular does stand out to me very interestingly. You got two drivers that are both relatively tall, both from Michigan, getting at each other like that. It reminds me more of not Joey Logano, but more of Brad Keselowski when he was coming up. I feel that when you go back and look at Brad Keselowski's Xfinity Series days with Junior Motorsports, and then later on with Team Penske, where he made much of his career at. You look back at those incidents with Denny Hamlin, with Kyle Busch, a number of other drivers, and Brad made an ass of himself a number of times. Sorry for my language there, but that's just what it is. I feel like Brad ruffled a lot of feathers coming up, just like Carson's doing now. And inevitably, you couldn't hold back Brad Keselowski from becoming a NASCAR Cup Series champion just a few short years later. I feel like in this sport, talent and determination are ultimately what leads you to victory, not about how well or how disliked you are in the garage. And I feel that at the end of the day, if Carson Hocevar continues to mount a charge, continues to show speed, continues to flash pace, and continues to make headlines for the wrong reason or for the right reason, he's going to continue to stay in the conversation, much like someone like Kevin Harvick did in the past. When he was not having success on the track, he was staying in the headlines one way or the other. So while I do think that it could impact his career in the short term to keep having these run-ins, keep having these little tiffs with drivers, whether it be a newer guy or an older guy, I really don't think at the end of the day, like at the long-term goal of it all, I don't think it's going to matter for him. I think that Hocevar is one of the probably 5 to 10 best up-and-coming talents in the sport at the moment. And if he can continue to show pace, continue to, show that he has what it takes to compete at this level, he's going to continue to get opportunities and continue to progress up the ranks here. So while I agree that, like I said, if he keeps having these run-ins, it's definitely going to slow him down. I ultimately think if you're talented and determined enough, it's really not going to matter. Moving on, though, we are obviously talking about Hocevar and Smith a little bit more, and those two second-year sophomore drivers in the Cup Series, they haven't won at this point. They've struggled at times. Obviously, only 2 opportunities left to make the playoffs at Richmond and Daytona. Their opportunity is to claim that victory, and that one last final bit of the playoff spot are starting to look slimmer and slimmer. So just to take this out and zoom it out a little bit, make it a bit more of a macro question, Matthew, of the 6 cars spread out between Spire and Front Row, which team has the best opportunity to make the postseason?
I mean, honestly, you would say I don't think either. But if you have to pick, there are so many different factors. I think you got to lean Spire, though. I think you do. I'm just looking at the standings, obviously, now. Hocevar is the best of the bunch. McDowell's up there. Even though McDowell is only 4 points behind Hocevar. But at the same time, I feel like McDowell has been really quiet this year, yet he's still doing pretty decently for the first time in new equipment. And then Zane Smith is down in 27th at points. His teammate, Noah Gragson, is 33rd. His other teammate, Todd Gilliland, is 31st, which I think if you logged this race, and I remember doing this in my Olympics class for Professor MacArthur at Utica University, where you're taking down each, when somebody says their name, you pretty much code it, right? I don't know if Gragson or Gillen were even mentioned today. That's kind of how, I can't say irrelevant they've really been this season, but they've just not been good at all, and that kind of sucks. And even Zane Smith, he doesn't have a top 5 at all. He does have a pole, but I think Zane Smith is a lot better than what he's shown too. And then Justin Haley, I don't even want to talk about Justin Haley being 30th in points right now. I know Silly Season's following his name a lot in recent, even in the next couple weeks and months, we might, I don't know, that's the Silly Season rumor, so we'll see what happens there. But to answer your question really longly for no reason whatsoever, it's got to be Spire. I think only in the sense that they've been better this year. However, though, too, because I think Michael McDowell could definitely win Daytona. However, I think Zane Smith in a Ford on a super speedway is really good as well. And Gillen usually has the pace, but it's just not been there. It really just hasn't. And Gregson, I don't know about Gregson at this point. It seems like you can't really pick where he's going to do well. He just randomly shows up and runs in the top 10 somewhere, and then the next week he's just out. I don't know if it's the equipment. I don't know if the charter thing is really affecting them a lot. It could be. We don't know that. But, yeah, I think Spire probably has the edge, mainly because of Hocevar and McDowell. But it wouldn't shock me that much if Zane Smith somehow won at Daytona.
It is a place he has won at before. Matthew, let me provide some context, though, as to why Todd Gilliland has seemingly slipped off the face of the earth. Last season, he was with the 38 team as Michael McDowell had the main entry over at the 34 car. But when McDowell moved over to the 71 to take Zane Smith's spot at Spire Motorsports, he took with him his crew chief and pretty much everybody that worked on that car. So when that's, 34 team was pretty much left completely vacant, they moved Gilliland over to that car and put Zane Smith in with Gilliland's old crew chief, Ryan Berginti, who, as we saw, made a ASS of himself on pit road by using a very not good word toward Carson Hocevar on pit road last week at Iowa. Now, I feel that because of that, Gilliland, much like Ty Gibbs, as we spoke about earlier, has had his development completely sidetracked by trying to build up a whole other team with him. And I just don't think that was very fair to Todd Gilliland. I feel like he's been a very loyal soldier over there front row, and I feel like they kind of did him dirty this year. But as long as they're committed to him next year, I really don't think it matters. As far as who amongst those 6 cars has the best shot to win, obviously you have to look at Daytona for front row because they haven't shown race-winning speed anywhere this year at any racetrack of any kind. And it's really unfortunate because I felt that they had the equipment and the Penske alliance that they have. I felt that that was going to help elevate that program. But unfortunately, having 3 winless Cup drivers in your 3 seats is just not a winning formula. And they're showing that this year. But you look at Spire, they've only got 3 cumulative Cup wins amongst their ranks. And obviously, they don't have very much to speak of this season in terms of race-winning pace. I do think, though, that Hocevar last summer ran 10th at Richmond, and this is when he was a rookie. Now, you also have to look at the fact that he won there in trucks in 2023. I think if you're looking at any of them to win at non-Daytona, I think Hocevar has the best shot at Richmond. I obviously don't think he's going to win that race, but I think if you're, throwing out a projection, I think that he has the best shot of them to win at either place because he's just aggressive that he'll do enough. He'll try to do something to win. But maybe the rains come down again in South Florida and Justin Haley gets a second career win in the middle of a pit stop sequence, so it's impossible to tell. Moving on to our final question here. It's a bit of a quick one, though, Matthew. So I feel like through 2/3 of the season, we've just finished race 24 at Watkins Glen. In a season where there really hasn't been a truly dominant team, it makes you wonder which team and which driver will truly contend down the stretch. So in 10 words or less, what will be a key factor in determining this year's champion?
I'm going to give you exactly 10 words, not including what I'm saying right now, right? Consistency, strong performances, luck, right place at the right time. That's what I got for you.
Okay. Sounds good. Glad you had some bullet points there.
For you. I wasn't going to say, here's 2 words for you, then give you a paragraph. Those were my 10 words. I studied those words, Tanner, before we got on air, and I was making sure I was going to say them.
Sounds good. I'm going to be a little bit more brief. Speed at the right time. If you have speed and track position, it doesn't matter. Okay. Now, instead of continuing on with our NASCAR talk, we're going to bring Kobe back in and talk some more about the Australian Supercars, who, for the first time since 2019, the Repco Supercars Championship returned to Queensland Raceway, site of the Sprint Cup season finale. The weekend was dominated by Triple Eight's Red Bull and Pole Racing as Broc Feeney wrapped up the inaugural Sprint Cup title and became the first driver to clinch a spot in the new Supercars finals, their version of the playoffs. Feeney won races 1 and 3, while teammate Will Brown took the second race after Feeney was penalized for jumping the start. Broc Feeney now has 12 wins as we enter the endurance racing season, with the AirTouch 500 at the Bend up next in mid-September, as Thomas Randall sits on the playoff bubble and 20 points ahead of Kai Allen, the first driver below the cut line. So, Kobe, I'm going to toss this one over to you first. Is Broc Feeney emerging as the next gold standard driver a la Shane Van Gisbergen or Scott McLaughlin that his competitors will be chasing for years to come?
Yeah, it certainly looks that way, right? And it was interesting, when we saw Scott McLaughlin leave for IndyCar and Shane Van Gisbergen leave for NASCAR, and all those Supercars drivers looking, at flirting at, trying to run in NASCAR, whether it's try to, build a career over here in America or, just having some fun in their free time. Because, with the Supercars schedule, you have a lot of off weekends throughout the year. So if you can find the right opportunity, you can go race anywhere in the world as a Supercars driver. And we're wondering, like, with some of the biggest stars in the series leaving, we were wondering if we could potentially see an identity crisis for Supercars, where you'd wonder what in the world happened with the face of the series and all of that. Like, who's going to be the face of the series moving forward? And we're wondering who is going to be the next guy. And I think we've already found him, and his name is Broc Feeney. And it's really impressive seeing how young this guy is and how many wins he's already had. Really crazy that he has 12 wins so far this year, and he's piled up a lot more wins, in his other past seasons in Supercars, and he's already looking like he's certainly going to be, like you said, down at the next gold standard, the measuring stick that all the drivers are going to try to beat, in the years to come. Broc Feeney, I said this last year after Will Brown, came in and won the championship his first year, at Triple A. I said that this will probably light a fire under Broc Feeney in 2025 because after he's been the guy over at that team, and then you have this new guy, Will Brown, come in year 1 and win the championship after Brock's been there for a couple of years. So I'm sure that didn't sit well with him. And this year we've seen a different Broc Feeney. His first few years, been a lot of learning and all of that, but this year he's definitely staked his claim as the main guy to beat in the Supercars championship, and it's going to be interesting in what he does. Once we get to the postseason. In the finals, to see if he can maintain this form throughout the end of the year and end up winning his first Supercars championship. If Broc Feeney keeps up this form, I think he could win multiple championships, Bathurst 1000 or 2 and a whole bunch of Supercars races. And if he continues to win at this rate, he's gonna continue knocking up the list, on the all-time wins list in the Supercars championship. And it's really crazy that he's this young and he's already won this many races. And I think sky's the limit for him, that he can do a lot of incredible things throughout his Supercars career.
Yeah, off camera, I almost threw up just now because I didn't realize Broc Feeney was only 22 years old, and he's already this good. And I couldn't fathom it. I actually got sick for a second. Yes, absolutely. This kid's got so much freaking talent at his age, where I'm pretty sure now he either has the same amount of wins as his age or he has more now of 22 wins. He's just, I know, granted, it's the best equipment, right? And I don't know how the switch to Ford's going to do for them, but he's locked in for quite a long time. And I think he truly has the potential to really get up there with a Shane Van Gisbergen, with a Scott McLaughlin. It just, and then obviously his hair, he took over Jamie Wincup's number 88. So I guess we're going to see what happens. But for Broc Feeney also, I believe, has more wins this season or the same amount of wins this season as his teammate Will Brown has in his career. And Will Brown is 5 years older than him, and Will Brown is a champion while Broc Feeney is not yet. That says a lot about the sky is not even the limit. It's like even higher up for this kid. Broc Feeney is truly an incredible talent. I think this is one that I know you can't really say NASCAR. I got away from them because they got Shane Van Gisbergen, but I think Broc Feeney is a guy who is itching to do an Xfinity race in NASCAR. I've seen him repost people who do mock-up schemes where he's always boasting on iRacing that he's racing an Xfinity car or a Cup car at some road course, even ovals. I think Broc Feeney wants to explore and expand out, and I think maybe we see the same thing like Shane Van Gisbergen, absolutely belt to butt every single year you're in Supercars, when you're healthy, when you're winning, and then towards the end of your career say, hey, I'm going to go try something else, and then we might see Broc Feeney at NASCAR sometime down the road. But yeah, Broc Feeney, he is the new gold standard driver. He really is. And it is crazy that Will Brown got a championship before him because I think Will Brown has a lot of talent as well. But Broc Feeney just seems to be even on another level. And that says a lot considering usually if Broc Feeney's not in victory lane or whatever I guess they call it, usually it's Will Brown. But yeah, Broc's been on an absolute tear. And not the fanboy, obviously, but I'm just shocked the fact that he's only 22 years old. And we even think like somebody who gets one win at that age is incredible. And you see what Broc Feeney's doing even last year as a 21-year-old, 20 to 21, and now this year he's 22. It's like, holy heck, guys. That's just, yeah, he's the next gold standard.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to argue that based on his resume. Argue against it, I guess I should say. Obviously, born in 2002, he spent most of his Super 3 Series season when he was 16 years old, just absolutely lighting the world on fire with 12 podiums. Won his first season in Super 3. Then the 2 years later, after 2020, where COVID sidelined a lot of activity, he came into the Super 2 Series and obviously just absolutely wiped the floor with everybody. 8 podiums in 9 races, which is absolutely stunning. Won the championship there, moves up to Supercars first year, gets a win. 3 podiums, but a 6th place points finish over a 34-race season. Then he moved up the next year, 28 races, 5 wins, 3rd in the points. Last year, 24 races, 6 wins, 2nd in the points to Will Brown. And then you got this season, man, 21 races, 10 wins. He's won almost half of the races this season. He's got 13 podiums. The kid is absolutely lights out fast and has the results to back it up. And I just don't think there's really anything holding him back from any of his ambitions. I think he is clearly one of the best we've seen come out of the category in a very long time. And obviously, you have to look at someone like Scott McLaughlin, like a Shane Van Gisbergen, guys that have, transcended that discipline and had success in other sports. I've got to feel like Broc Feeney is going to be a name stateside that you're going to be hearing for years to come.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really excited to see what Broc Feeney is able to do with his career in Supercars and beyond. As you said, Matthew, like he has the itch to, try a different style of racing and see how he gets along with that. So I guess he would say in Australia, it's something he like to take a crack at. Just give it a chance. And since we're almost at the 90-minute mark of this show, I think we should get close to wrapping this up. And now it's time for our Grid One shining moment from this racing weekend. There's a lot to choose from, whether it's NASCAR at Watkins Glen, IndyCar at Portland, or Supercars at Queensland Raceway. It was actually the first race there since 2019. Good to be back at Queensland. Thought he put on some incredible races, so maybe that'll be one of someone's shining moments. And so let us know down in the chat below whether you're watching live on replay. What's the one thing that stood out to you the most from this weekend? Starting with you, Matthew. What's your Grid One shining moment?
It's tough, really. I don't think I have one, but you got to say SVG and Red Bull, even if you have Zilich's victory, and then you go over to the other side of the country, and or the other side of the world, not the country. Broc Feeney, Will Brown winning as well. So Red Bull as a motorsports sponsor, pretty much, I would say they're the one shining moment. And then obviously Palou cementing himself as an all-time great already, I feel, with 4 championships before 100 races. Says a lot about that guy's talent. So those are my, I guess, 2.5. I would say Red Bull sponsored as a whole, one shining moment, being able to win multiple races. This would be 5 races this weekend. And then, Palou just being Alex Palou.
I'm going to have a little bit of a two-parter, but they share the same number and race on the same team. Ryan Blaney getting the pole at Watkins Glen, of all places, defeating Shane Van Gisbergen at Watkins Glen was, frankly, completely out of nowhere. I mean, the Ford racing team of Team Penske and the NASCAR Cup Series have not had an exceptional year on Saturday. They definitely haven't been strong on the road courses, so not only Blaney getting a pole in general coming as a surprise, but to beat the best in the business and then hold him off for 35 of the 90 laps today was also supremely impressive, even with SVG just breathing down his neck the entire time. It really just shows how talented Ryan Blaney is and what he is capable of when he's given the right equipment. Now, switching it over to the other number 12 on Team Penske's IndyCar side, obviously, you got to tip your cap to Will Power. What an incredible day for that 12 team. Another familiar face in victory lane with a familiar driving, style, a familiar team. I just feel like Will Power has been an absolute unit for the last 2 decades in American open wheel racing. And I think it would be a real shame if Team Penske kicked him to the curb earlier than they really need to, especially after the year that he's put on despite the team's struggles. I think that Will Power has been one of the greatest IndyCar drivers of my lifetime, and he's not given nearly the credit he deserves. And today really served as a great touch point for those that probably forgot how great he is to see once again just what he's capable of when he's given a good car. So both Team Penske 12s, you are my one shining moment.
Yeah, for my shining moment, gonna shout out 2 drivers from the IndyCar race at Portland. But actually, before we get into that, Adam's shining moment said SVG dominating Watkins Glen. Yeah, I'm sure that's gonna be a lot of popular shining moments for our viewers in Australia and New Zealand, which we have a lot of. Yeah, so really appreciate you guys watching down under. And I'm sure we're going to have a lot of clips this week on SVG that you guys will enjoy hearing about. In my shining moment, got to give a call to the 4th place finisher today, Graham Rahal. It seemed like he come completely out of nowhere to get this finish. And he started outside of the top 20, I believe. I think he started 22nd and drove all the way up into the top 5 on strategy. Thought it was a really great run for Graham. I know it hasn't really been the season that he's hoped for, obviously. I know Rahal led him in Lanigan Racing. I think Louis Foster's probably been one of the bright spots of this team. But, the team as a whole, just they haven't always had the speed everywhere, and the execution has not been the best. But I think Graham Rahal's number 15 team executed a great race today, and they get a top 5 after the year or last couple of years that they've had with this team. I think that this can feel like a win for the organization that they were able to get Graham into the top 5. And also got to give a call to 6th place finisher, Callum Milot in Prima Racing. I know Callum's had a really rough year with that Prima team, year 1 in IndyCar. And although Callum's outside of the top 20 in the driver standings, like I said before on past shows, I don't think that's reflective of the type of driver he is. I think he's much better than a driver who's outside the top 20 in points. And it's definitely, when you have a new team coming into a series, there's going to be a lot of growing pains as Prima's had all year. And for Prima to be able to execute a 6th place finish at Portland National Raceway, I thought that's something that they should be proud of, should feel like a win for them as well. And nice to see 2 drivers in Rahal and Ilott, who's had really rough 2025 seasons today in Portland on a positive note. And I believe that's all we have for tonight's show. And looking at our upcoming schedule, guys, I know we were debating whether or not to do the encore show, with Ben and Brandon on Monday or Tuesday. I believe we've decided on Tuesday for that show. So be sure to watch that show. I'm sure welcome Ben back on the show after a week off. And they have a lot to talk about, whether it's ARCA, Trucks or Xfinity at Watkins Glen, plus the Indy Next race that happened earlier today at Portland National Raceway, and whatever open segment they have. There's certainly no shortage of stuff to talk about. And then I'll be back on Wednesday night with Matt White, and hopefully have Joshua Birch back as well after a week off. And then we'll have our pre-race show weekend format next weekend. Previewing NASCAR at Richmond, and then we'll do it all over again next Sunday. Oh, actually, the Cup race is on a Saturday night, so I guess we'll see you on Sunday afternoon for the grid wrap up show.
Night racing. Woo! We love it.
For the next 2 weeks, guys. Yeah, Richmond Saturday night, and Daytona the next Saturday night, assuming we don't get any rain in Florida that time of year. So, so we'll have wrap up shows on Sunday afternoon before the sun goes down, believe it or not, which will be wonderful for us here at the Grid Network, and also going to give another call to our Patreon investors, Colin Deschelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew Owens for really coming through for us on weekends like this when we send Joe Samniego and Nicole Fryer, anyone from the team, to the racetrack. Yes, certainly really appreciate it. I know I've thanked you guys enough, but from the bottom of my heart and from the bottom of everyone's heart, Grid Network, we really, really appreciate everything you do. And also if you like what you saw tonight, if you want to, be sure to buy us a coffee or participate in the YouTube Super Chat, and you can have your name right there on the board with all the people who have supported the Grid Network. And also a reminder, we're all over social media, as Matthew said earlier in the show. Yeah, at Grid Network TV on all of your favorite social media platforms, and also on gridnetworktv.com. We're going to have a lot of content coming within the next 12 hours or so, and I'm probably going to be hearing the birds sing and seeing the sunrise because I have a lot to do. Got to edit articles from Nicole Fry from Portland. Got to edit Matthew's article from Watkins Glen, and then all of the photos Joe sent over for our photo gallery. So I definitely earned my money's worth when this is all over. And with that said, we're out of time for tonight. So for Matthew Bro from GridNetworkTV.com and Tanner Smith from Pitbox Press, I'm Kobe Lambert from Grid Tonight. Thank you all for watching tonight's show, and I hope you have a wonderful week.